know, we have a very special speaker, Andrew Lamb. Andrew is an associate editor with Pacific News Service, and he's also a writer. If you listen to National Public Radio, maybe you have heard him tell some of his stories. In fact, he was on the radio for an hour on Tuesday. And if you want to hear that, we can give you information. You can hear it on the internet. And also you can read his stories on the website, and you all have this handout. If you look at the bottom, there's the website. You can click on these stories and read more. There's one on the back here, which I think you might find interesting, about names, and there are many more in the front. First, I'll tell you a little bit about Andrew. He came to the United States from Vietnam when he was 11 years old. As a child and as a college student, he took ESL classes, so he knows exactly how many of you feel as you work on improving your English. When he was a student at UC Berkeley, his parents wanted him to major in biochemistry, and that's what he did. He majored in biochemistry. But in his heart, Andrew knew that he wanted to be a writer, and that's what he is. So that's the story he's going to tell us today. Andrew is going to talk about how he became a writer. Please join me in welcoming Andrew Lamb to Contra Costa College.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to speak to ESL students because I was one myself not too long ago. and you know, the process of writing is always a struggle for me because you know, the question of how one becomes a writer is something that I wake up in the morning thinking about all the time, because I wake up in the morning and say, I'm a writer. And I'm very surprised by that, even though I've been writing for 12 years. English is my third language. I studied French when I was a kid living in Vietnam. And when the war ended, I had to leave Vietnam with my parents and my sister and my brother. And, you know, I don't think back then I had imagined myself being an American, let alone being an American writer. And it was quite a shock for me to just leave Vietnam. But I think there is something that is very magical at the age of 11 or 12 when you have to embrace another language that adults don't necessarily have the same faculty for. Because language, when you learn at the cusp of puberty, is somehow magical, I think. It has a kind of a weight to it that adult learners of new languages don't. I don't know how to put this into language, and I'm a writer, but I remember learning every word of English at 12 or 13 and feeling a physicality of the language that I wouldn't, let's say if I want to learn Spanish now or German, it would be very much learned up here in my head. But at 11 or 12, language sort of seeped into me almost through every pore of my body. And I read a lot. When I first came to the United States, the first thing I did was I bought a typewriter for 45 cents. It was used, like a very old typewriter. And I had my first book in English called The Wind and the Willow. And one summer, when I was 12, I spent the whole summer typing out that whole book on that typewriter just so that I can learn English. And then by the next year, I was a very good typist. But I don't think I learned English very fast, though. It was beginning to sink in. I read a lot of books when I was growing up in the United States. Welcome. Come on in.
You're popular.
Oh my God. Okay, so those people who came late, I got to my teenage years where I did a lot of reading. So the short of it, I became obsessed with reading in English. I think that really, really helped me because there was a turning point in my life when I was about 16 or 17 when I was reading a book in English, and I can't remember which book now because I could read a book in one day. So that I suddenly realized that I was reading a very bad book, that the writer doesn't know how to write. And it occurs to me that I never made a judgment on English writing before that I always read without any judgment at all, because I just assumed that anybody who's published is a great writer, because I just can't imagine bad writers getting published. Of course, how wrong I was, but at 16, 17, I didn't know this, you know, and when I read this book, I realized, actually, I probably can write something better if I can perfect my English. And it struck me as odd because I never thought about that before, that, you know, here's this kid who was a refugee from Vietnam who learned English as a third language, is thinking to himself that he can write a book better than some native born. And it's a kind of arrogant that kind of shocked me in a way, but at the same time, it also stirred my imagination. And still being Vietnamese, you know, Asian family, first generation of immigrants, the pressure to become successful in the United States was very strong. So my brother was the engineer, my sister was going to be the businesswoman, and I was going to be the doctor. So I was supposed to be pre-med. That was predetermined already from high school. And when I got into Berkeley, which is what was required of me, because that was expected, I went to Berkeley and I studied biochemistry and sort of let go of this idea that I could become a writer, study chemistry, organic chem, and all that difficult stuff. And even then, I realized that my gravitation was always toward the humanities. There were prerequisite courses in be it English, political science, anthropology. And I did really well in those courses, but in my mind, I didn't think of them as real courses, because being Asian and immigrant and being told that I have to do well in the sciences, to me, geometry or calculus or chemistry, those were real classes. And anthropology, humanities, that's just soft stuff. And that was the way I was thinking all the way through college. Even though I did well and I felt more at home in those courses than I was in biochemistry or organic chemistry, I just felt that this was supposed to be my destiny, because I, being someone who honored my parents' wishes, someone filial, Confucius child, this was what was supposed to be.